A quiet winter meetings for your Minnesota Twins, but plenty of noise afterwards as the Phoenix Suns owners, the Ishbia brothers, may be interested in buying your Twins. We're going to talk about it. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello again and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren. You can unfollow me on the tweets at Brandon_WARNE. We appreciate you being here. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. I am joined, as I've been a couple times here in Dave Brown's absence, by Mr. Gregg Masterson. Follow him on the tweets at Gregg T. Masterson with 3 G's, 1 in the front, 2 in the middle. How we doing?
I'm doing well. It's been fun to hold Dave's spot warm for the last couple weeks.
Is it bad taste to ask you what the T represents?
The T?
Is
that's actually a little. It's a personal matter, I guess.
So it's not like Harry Truman where the S was just the letter S, because you had 2 grandpas with the names S and they didn't want to make one upset. So they just used the letter S as his middle name.
I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't thought that far ahead to figure out what the T stands for.
Okay. Well, it's a middle name to be named later, which is kind of fun.
There we go.
Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. And we'll have more from Gametime here in a little bit because they're one of today's sponsors. But I'd love to hear from you in the chat if you're watching us on our live premiere on YouTube. Again, thank you so much for that. Give us a thumbs up, give us a like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. 5-star review on Apple Podcasts is huge for us. And we've had a few people reach out. I will send you a little care package if you show proof that you have either Locked On Twins on your year-end Spotify Wrapped, or if you do these 2 things, you subscribe on YouTube and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Show me that you've done that, and I'd be happy to send you a little something as a token of our appreciation. So we'll talk about the winter meetings that were, because they really weren't for the Twins. Not a lot happening, but Twins now, news breaking after the meetings that the Ishbia brothers, and if you're not familiar, they own the Phoenix Suns and the Mercury, the WNBA team. They also have a minority stake in the MLS's Nashville club. These are billionaire brothers. They would have Justin be the lead investor. Matt would be the governor. I get the sense that Matt would kind of be the more forward-facing one, kind of like the Ziggy Wilf to his brother's Mark Wilf. There'd be the more public head of the company. Not entirely unlike the Pohlads, where Jim was out front and the other brothers were not as obvious. But initial thoughts, because, I watched Tom Fremming's video, someone you've worked with at Twins Daily, and he said he's not really letting himself get all that excited because of teams or of people showing interest and not ultimately buying teams. But, and the video that Tom uses at the beginning of his video is one that I had also watched where Matt said, when I do something, I'm full steam ahead. That, to me, as much as I want to be cautiously optimistic, I don't know, man. If he's determined to own the Twins, and he got approved by the NBA, other owners, because the ownership group is kind of like a country club, and they have kept guys like Mark Cuban out. I don't know. I mean, again, I guess Cuban got approved by the NBA and not MLB, but I'm allowing myself to be optimistic. Am I getting ahead of myself?
I don't think so, because I'm excited, but I'm not letting myself get too excited, if that makes sense. I'm encouraged by this pair of potential owners. Like you said, they already did get cleared. They are NBA owners. There is kind of that first hurdle. Like any dirt or whatnot that would have potentially gone into, not letting them or preventing them from being owners probably would have come out already. There is the aspect of, Mark Cuban being denied by the rest of the owners, but that was a little bit because they didn't really want to deal with Mark Cuban.
He's a lightning rod to say the least. Do you still you're allowing yourself to be optimistic? I suspect.
I'm excited. I don't know that I've ever allowed myself to be optimistic about anything, but
fair.
Like you said, it's they didn't let Cuban in, but for the most part, if you're able to make it in with one group of billionaire owners, you're probably going to have a pretty decent shot at making it with another group. So aspect probably isn't part of it. Obviously there's always going to be the money aspect. How much are they willing to pay? How much are the Pohlad family willing to sell it for? But in terms of like these two guys as potential owners, it's, I would say, pretty close to like 90th percentile outcome for Twins fans. These guys I believe I saw the pair of them combined would be the third richest owner in baseball. They are sports fans. I can't remember which one of them was like a walk-on at Michigan State.
I believe it's Matt.
Yes. Then you look at what they've done with the Suns, what they've done with the Mercury. They immediately started spending, maxing out, paying luxury tax stuff for the Suns. The Mercury, I believe I saw they put like a $50 million facilities like immediately after acquiring it. I think that from what I've heard, they had a pretty good approach to like the streaming aspect and getting the games on TV or on streaming and everything. Like there's a lot to be really excited about, specifically about these guys. I don't know what the time frame is. I don't know if talks fall apart, but in terms of like the full range of potential owners that you could have, this seems to be one of the better outcomes you can hope for.
I think the only way the Pohlads could have worse public image around here is if this were to fall through. You know what I mean? Like to not only go from the Pohlads to the Ishbias in your mind and then to have it fall apart. Like again, not necessarily would be the fault of the Pohlads if the Ishbias came in with a lower offer, not necessarily low ball, but just lower than what the Pohlads want to get. I don't know, man. That would take a very low morale even lower among fans. They swung a trade for Kevin Durant not long after buying the Suns. You mentioned the streaming. They've been, pushing the envelope as far as creativity. I think too, that's what's interesting is, money allows added creativity. It's not just about acquiring players, upgrading facilities, but maybe they're taking a little less on TV with the hopes that it builds up the rest of the fan base. And maybe that pays dividends in ticket sales, merchandise, other forms of engagement. You can have a singular focus of what's in front of you, or you can build up around it and let the water level rise with it. And I wonder if maybe that's something they're thinking is like better to be efficient with your distribution than to be trying to maximize your potential on all earnings fronts. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, if you just want to straight up compare them to the Pohlad family, they're about worth 3 times as much money as the Pohlads. And for the Pohlads, we don't exactly know things like net worth, but we have estimates. And about a third of the Pohlads' net worth is tied up in the Twins. And so when you're thinking about it like that, it's like, oh yeah, of course, like a group that has $15 billion is going to be able to take one on the chin more often for maybe long-term outlook than a group that is worth $5 billion, 1.5 of which is tied up in the ball club. Right. I mean, you can definitely see why an ownership group like that, even beyond, what they're actually buying, but just like the willingness to maybe take a little bit more of a long-term approach. I am also curious about potential local partners that they might bring in on this as an ownership group, which obviously the Pohlads are local, but as guys who are not from Minnesota, they are from Michigan. They are currently in Arizona. One of them went to Vandy. I'm curious as to what sort of people like who they might be interested in bringing in as part of their ownership group, who are local, who might have tighter ties to the team.
Joe Mauer makes too much sense, right? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know how much it would take, but yeah, I mean, that would be really fun. It might be more trouble than he wants to take on, though.
I mean, it just comes down to, owners want to say they're losing money, but don't show their books, which again, I understand why they don't. If Joe Mauer thinks he can turn his 50 million or whatever into more money, he would jump in, I'm sure, on that. But again, like you said, there's a lot of stuff we don't know about that. But again, the TV stuff is interesting. As far as money too, I did see on an interview Matt was doing that he's like, nobody's seeing us go into the second apron and being like, oh man, that billionaire worried about how he's spending his money. So, I mean, to me, that mentality was just so refreshing to hear. It was just a soundbite. It was just a clip, but he's just like, yeah, I'm not really thinking about my bottom line. I mean, he's obviously thinking about not losing money per se, at least not hand over fist, but the fan mentality is what enabled Steve Cohen to go get Juan Soto for a dollar figure that you and I could never even imagine. And so I'm going to let myself be intrigued by this, maybe even excited. And, we'll see where it goes from there. Obviously, it probably won't make any difference on the personnel front anytime soon outside of, if they were to buy the team in the next 6 months, that would be a Dave St. Peter ouster. And then, whatever else happens probably in the off season for any other decisions that happen. But I don't know that if they sign a promissory note or a deal memo or whatever you would call a letter of intent, I don't know if that's going to be the go ahead for Derek Falvey to run out and see if Christian Walker's still available to play first base or anything like that. So it's cautious optimism, but it's optimism all the same.
If it takes maybe 6 months for this to get done, maybe this is middle of next summer, potentially that the deal could go through. How would it look for a brand new owner to take over in like July? And all of a sudden, after the last 2 years where payroll was a huge issue at the trade deadline, they say, just do what you want. Would that not be the most endearing thing that you can possibly get out of a brand new ownership group, especially given the last couple of years?
Especially because it's going to probably be a competitive division. It's probably going to be, if the Twins don't push a lot of chips in, they're still going to have a bunch of prospects that are going to be desirable. You'll have a better feel for what teams have whatever you need available as far as pitching or, and we'll talk about how the Twins plan to fill their needs because Bobby Nightingale filed a column on that. And so, yeah, I think like taking over the All-Star break would be kind of like a fun scenario where, it's obviously not full steam ahead. They're not going to be just picking up the keys and, all that. But that would be an interesting timeline, but I also think a realistic one.
Yeah, and all of these things are, things that we don't get to really comment on. We don't know, but it's pretty safe to assume that new ownership will not be in place by the time opening day rolls around. But as Twins fans, I think that there is some hope that we can have that by the middle of the summer, this goes through and they want to do like the nice PR thing. And I don't know. I think that would be the perfect way for a new ownership group to take over. But of course, it's kind of a pipe dream, but that probably is like the best case scenario in terms of time frame. Otherwise, we might see some changes over the off season.
Well, let's do this. Let's take our first of 2 breaks. And then when we come back, Bobby Nightingale of the Minnesota Star Tribune, I still say Minneapolis sometimes, still getting used to that, filed a column talking about, all the things the Twins did or didn't do in Dallas over the week. And then we'll also talk about, some secondary stuff as well before we get out of here. But again, first, word from a sponsor. If you aren't rocking with Gametime yet, now would be the time to do it. If you love going to live events like I do, Greg here, not much of a public figure, so I don't know about that one. But if you are going to a concert, sporting event, comedy show, Gametime is the place to go. Download that Gametime app. Flip through there, with your home marketplace, Minneapolis, St. Paul. For me, I'm looking and it's telling me events Friday, Saturday night for concerts downtown. But if I want to go to something in a smaller venue on a Tuesday night, Gametime, still the place to check it out. My favorite feature, and I know I hammer this nonstop, is that all-in pricing. So you can, at the beginning of the transaction, or the beginning of your search, really, toggle that option, and it will tell you how much a ticket will cost the moment you hit purchase. Don't got to worry about that bait and switch on the back end of those convenience fees that are convenience only for everyone except you, the buyer. And of course, too, the panoramic views. I love that. The panoramic seat view, where I know what I'm going to be looking at, what the stage is going to look like, what the field is going to look like. You name it, whatever your venue you're going to, you want to know what your eyes are going to be on. And this is what you need. Gametime and that panoramic seat view. They also have the lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a seat in the same row and section elsewhere cheaper. Again, 110% of the difference if you can find that. And they have the most flexible customer service policy in the game today. You can't go wrong. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're rocking here with Mr. Gregg Masterson. Gregg, we are coming off a winter meetings, 4 days in Dallas, which pretty quiet for the Twins. They did use a Rule 5 pick on Aberson Castellano, their first Rule 5 pick now in, I think they said 7 years since Tyler Kinley, but not much else to show for it. I kind of like to joke about it, but did you think they were just like hanging out in the hotel room, eating from the mini bar and the buffet? I feel like, yeah, obviously they were there trade talks, because trading is probably going to be the way that they get to where they're going roster wise. But it is always kind of funny to me mentally to think about what it's like for a team to go to the winter meetings and come back with a Rule 5 pick. It's almost like they could have had team front office t-shirts that said, I went to Dallas and all I got was this lousy Rule 5 pick.
I feel like it's kind of the vibes where if you've ever been to like an industry conference and you show up and you don't actually have anything to, like, you're not presenting anything, you're just there to learn or whatever, and you're just coasting through the day. You're looking forward to 5 o'clock when everybody's going to head to the bar. You're turning in at 1 or 2 in the morning, all of those different things. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of that going on. But also, I'm sure that they, had their standard talks. I'm sure they were asking everybody with a pulse what it would take to get Chris Paddock off of their hands. I'm sure that they had productive conversations and all that. And I'm sure that it also is just good to be, somewhere that isn't the office because a lot of it, they're still conducting like internal business basically the entire time. And so I don't know. I hope they had a good time, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been to Dallas, but I suppose on anyone else's dime, it can be a fairly fun place.
It was cold.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
that's disappointing.
Cold for Texas might be different than cold for where I'm from, but
well, it was like 30.
Yeah, no, that's chilly then, because it was freezing here. But no, it's definitely, cold is a state of mind, and if everybody else around you is cold, you're going to feel a little more cold as well. So yeah, you kind of tease the idea of trading Chris Paddock, and the more we watch pitchers fly off the shelves, the more it seems like he at $7.5 million could be a really nice get for someone else. And basically it comes down to, it's not that I'm anti-Chris Paddock and not that the Twins would be anti-Chris Paddock, but based on their financial limitations, self-imposed, I will again clarify, you could probably get similar production for 1/10 the cost from Simeon Woods Richardson, from Zebby Matthews, from Matt Festa. David Festa. I did the wrong Festa again. Doggone it.
Not related.
Nope. I'm good for one of those every a few months. David Festa, who his numbers under the hood are off the charts. Like, I'm very excited for David Festa, so I should start to try to remember his name. But again, those guys could perform roughly the same as Paddock for a tenth of the money, and you could turn around and put that money into right-handed hitting outfielder, a first baseman, some combination of the two. I don't know. I feel like, and this isn't a knock on Bobby either. Like, there wasn't a lot of new ground covered here, but just kind of affirmation that, like, no, they're not trading Carlos Correa. That was not ever on the table. And yeah, all the guys who think they want to trade, they're still trying to trade. But beyond that, it's probably still going to be quiet for a little while.
Yeah, and I think that the trade market itself is also heating up. Obviously, we've seen some of the bigger names that are going to be moved over the last week or so.
And Cody Bellinger is probably getting close, I would guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I would guess that we are days away from a Cody Bellinger.
I doubt that they traded for Kyle Tucker without knowing that Cody Bellinger was not going to be in the North Side of Chicago next year.
Or I guess potentially Suzuki if they wanted to go that direction.
Would he do anything for you? On base guy, decent hitter. Compensated, but
that's the only thing is if I think I looked it up. He's making 18 for the next 2 years, and then I think that he hits arbitration because he had a 5-year contract. I believe, unless there's something screwy with his contract.
Usually those are weird because sometimes they'll have it negotiated where you have to release them at the end of that contract. And sometimes they'll have it where you can't even offer them a qualifying offer because they don't want their market tainted by that. So while you're speaking, I'm going to see if I can find anything on that.
So I'm not 100% sure what the 6th year area of that contract is, but it was a 5-year contract. And sometimes, unless it's written down, that might actually be an arbitration year. I don't know. And so, I would be fine with it. I just don't think that there is room or a way to put that $18 million onto this roster. I mean, that is more than what Paddock and Vasquez are making combined this year. And if we're already talking about they have to cut to just break even right now, well, then that's not super feasible. But if for some reason, if Chicago is willing to eat some money, I would be totally open to him, especially if it is just a 2-year deal and you're not on the hook for that 3rd year or anything like that. I would definitely be open to that.
I mean, you could non-tender if you were that concerned about it. Kotz over at Baseball Prospectus doesn't say anything. He does have a full no trade clause. And so I wonder if there's probably something else, some sort of provision on the back end of the contract that protects him. Because, he's at 3 for service time exactly. That would get him to 5, would have him a year short. There's probably something written in there that you or I are not aware of right now that would certainly play into why trade negotiations could be complicated. And so, I'm not opposed at the same time to if he's a corner outfielder who's mostly an on-base guy. That's not really an efficient use of resources either. So again, we're talking about something that's not going to happen anyway. I just like to talk about players and just kind of get a feel for where people are at, if they could help the team or not. And he certainly could, in a lot of ways, help the Twins.
I mean, good bad plays,
It's
as bad. I would rather, if you look at like the projections for the Twins bench right now, whoever they're bringing in is going to be replacing one of Deshaun Kiersey, Michael Hellman, or Austin Martin at this point. Mm-hmm. So basically any good bat, I'm not going to say no to. There's definitely room. There is a wide open DH spot, for example. But the money probably doesn't work, and the prospect capital probably doesn't work. He's on the wrong side of 30, or I believe he's going into his age 30 season right now. That's not really a trade that Derek Falvey usually makes for a guy getting paid, solid money who's on the wrong side of 30. So.
Now, with that said, he had his best offensive season this last year.
Of course.
21 homers, 16 stolen bases, walks almost 11% of the time, 138 weighted runs created plus. I mean, they don't just hand out guys like that. That's a nice player. Defensive value obviously not there, and you don't want to pay 18 million for a DH, whether you're using him as a DH or covering your eyes and hoping he handles the outfield well enough to call him a DH, quote unquote.
And at that point, I'd almost just rather have like Carlos Santana back.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you just run a kid out there in left field who can catch the ball and hopefully give you 100 weighted runs created plus or 88, 89. If the opportunity cost on a guy like that is not very high. If you've got some interesting guys in your organization, you can just give a bit of a look to. Let's do this. Let's take our final break. When we come back, we will talk about some of these bullet points that Bobby Nightingale II had on just kind of a few talking points that came out of Dallas here in the last couple of days. But again, this is our last break, and then we'll be right back. Are you rocking with FanDuel yet? Because if you're not, now is the perfect time, because you can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet hits. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Check out that FanDuel app. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're still rolling here with Gregg Masterson, and we're coming down the home stretch. Yeah, so Bobby Nightingale's bullet points. First one, whether it comes to a trade or freed up salary to sign a free agent, Twins seeking a first baseman and right-handed hitting outfielder, interested in Santana, Austin Hayes, who played for the hitting coach Matt Borgeschlut in Baltimore. I stole that from you, by the way. Dave has been saying Borgeschlut on the show. From your
it
videos.
Cracks me up every time I hear him say that.
Yeah, so good to know that you listen. Could be a fit in the outfield after he was let go by the Phillies last month. He also has some other information, but I want to talk about that because there's also like Randall Grichuk's out there. There's a few right-handed hitting outfielders who would make some sense. But at this point in the offseason, I think there's a few things at play here. First, the Twins probably don't want to paint themselves in a box with a specific one of those players. Like, I'm sure they have one they like better than the other between Austin Hayes, Randall Grichuk, and, price points they'd like each at, et cetera, et cetera. But those are the kind of moves that happen at the end of the offseason for a couple of reasons. First of all, prices come down. Guys are getting a little more desperate for jobs. But also, too, there's still just time in the offseason to see, maybe, I don't know, maybe a team signs somebody and DFA is an interesting right-handed hitting outfielder from like the Kyle Garlick archetype. Not that would be enough to really, get you too excited. But the Twins are never going to overplay their hand on a roster spot. And so I get the sense that even if they've honed in on which guy they like the most, that it's still probably going to be at least another month before they bring in that right-handed hitting outfielder. Do you think I'm reading into that too much?
I don't think so, unless, I don't know. I feel like if they're talking about how they need a first baseman and a right-handed hitting outfielder, if those are kind of their two kind of ideas, I feel like you might see that right-handed hitting outfielder pop up earlier if that is going to be the bigger of the two, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I feel like if they see, or I guess if it plays out that the bigger bat or the bigger name or the bigger dollar amount is going to be the first baseman, I would assume that we're going to hear about this extra outfielder showing up on like February 20th. Because that's kind of their MO. Like either like the day spring training starts or 2 weeks after or 2 weeks before, somewhere in that range. But given their especially around like their platoon outfielder types, that they've been so low profile that I can't imagine that would be kind of their A1 target at this point, unless there is a name that kind of comes across. They're like, oh no, wait, let's jump at this one. Unless that happens, I'm assuming that'll be a February 20th signing.
You know what stands out to me and I think would be a good idea is two right-handed hitters who can play the outfield, and one of them being an infielder besides, so like a Taylor Ward. Because here's the deal. Both of your corner outfielders, as things stand right now, are going to be left-handed. And so how do you decide on a given day which one you platoon? I mean, if on any given day you can put Taylor Ward in left and Randall Grichuk in right, and then, when the righty's starting, maybe you have Taylor Ward play a different spot, a different day, and, you can move some guys around, but you still protect the lefties a little better with a guy who can play first base, but also the outfield, especially because you have Jose Miranda as a right-handed option to play first base if you decide to go that route. I don't know. I think more versatility is a good thing, and I think that Taylor Ward makes a lot of sense. I still think a Ward for Paddock swap would make a lot of sense if you can find a salary-neutral way to get that done. I think their salaries are actually fairly close anyway, and if it was more in favor of Paddock, I don't think the Angels are going to be that tore up about it. But I think if otherwise it becomes hard to know which of those guys do you platoon and which one do you not. Maybe I'm creating a dilemma in my head.
Yeah, I think that it would be nice to have another guy who could play the outfield. However, there is like Willie Castro can potentially do that.
True. Yeah.
Where you sign, Randall Grichuk, let's just use that as the placeholder name, and he plays right field, Castro plays left field. This is assuming that like Brooks Lee and Royce Lewis are your second and third baseman. They're both going to be on the field against lefties, at which point you've got probably a right-handed first baseman at that point, I'm guessing, and then Miranda playing or DHing or whatever. I don't know. I think there's a lot of different ways that you could do this that make sense. It would be nice. I mean, and they love having players who aren't just stuck in the corner outfield, for example.
Right.
That's why Ahmed Rosario has been the name that I can never get out of my head. And we'll see if that actually happens. I doubt it.
Short at all? Like, is he at all a shortstop?
He can play some short. Like I would say he would.
Is he Willie Castro-esque?
He would be below Willie Castro. He would be below Brooks Lee. Okay. But also you don't feel like it wouldn't be like sticking Austin Martin at short anymore.
Well, it would be in a pinch anyway, because you have those other guys. I like to know what a guy can do. Obviously the team would know that ahead of time, but I like to know just when I'm, doing my roster research and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's a good name to keep an eye on too, especially because I don't know that the marketplace is going to be that hot and heavy for a guy like Ahmed Rosario.
But yeah, so I do think that they would probably shy away from just having two straight up corner outfield only platoon bats, even if if you look at the lineup and it doesn't include Edouard Julien right now, those are the only two true lefties in the lineup would be Larnach and Wallner. And so if you're planning on doing a straight up platoon with them, that would require you having two guys who could play corner outfield who are on your bench full time or like against righties. And I don't know how keen they are on having two right-handed outfielders, like mostly platoon, unless like one could cover center field. I think that would probably be part of the mix. Yeah, I don't know how likely they are to roster two platoon right-handed outfielders, but if they could find another like a somebody who can at least play like three positions, whether that's corner outfield and third base or first, third, and corner outfield or whatever, I could definitely see that happening, at which point maybe you just sign up to have Jose Miranda play first base every day ish and go from there.
The answer is Donovan Solano. How about that?
I mean, hear me out. I wouldn't hate it. I'm sure that it would not cost much money at all. You're probably talking about somewhere in the $1 to $3 million again. he had a good year in San Diego last year, but I don't see him. I can't remember exactly how much he made. I think it was a little bit more than the minimum. But like with the Twins the year before, he made $2 million. Sure, why not? I wouldn't hate it. I think that he's getting a little bit up there in age, and so there are always going to be concerns that he's not going to be able to smack the ball around the same way that he did. But he's not a bad bench piece to have. He can technically cover second and third if he really, really needs to, and otherwise,
2.1 million last year with the Twins, or 2023 with the Twins. So completely sane dollar figure, and one that they could acclimate. A couple quick ones before we get out of here. Doesn't sound like Griffin Jax is going to be used as a starter. I was never high on that idea. They'd be more likely to do a Louis Varland swingman thing. And Bobby makes a comparison to Tyler Holton of the Tigers. I think that's interesting. Derek Falvey asked to pick a prospect he thinks could impact the Major League club next year, and he picked Emmanuel Rodriguez. If I'm honest, that's kind of a layup to me. He's already on the 40-man roster. He has an approach that, is more big league ready just by virtue of discipline. I don't know. I mean, he closes the comment with saying he's a lot closer than we think. And that's a quote. That's not Bobby saying that. With that said, I don't know that quote means that much.
Well, so obviously it's like, oh, who do you think is going to be, I don't know, my number 2 prospect who's on the 40-man roster and has hit everywhere he is. And he finished at AAA last year. Obviously, I think he played 39 games total last year. So it was kind of a lost year.
My friend, your nemesis, Travis, asked me if I thought he'd make the team to start the season. And I don't think I see that.
No, I don't see that unless there's an injury to one of your starting corner
outfielders. Or if he has an Aaron Hicks 2013 spring training, and we all saw how that went to start the season. Wasn't he 1 for 35 or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, if that happens,
that might be out of your purview.
You would be the next man up. I mean, if there's any sort of injury to either of your corner outfielders, or anybody, or even Byron Buxton, I feel like Emmanuel Rodriguez is the move there. And so potentially if one of those 3 guys doesn't make it out of spring training, I think that anybody would rather have, even in his I don't know, if he didn't have the year, or oh my gosh, I don't know why my brain is just fogged up right now.
No, I get it. You said
even if he didn't have the year, you don't feel super confident in what you saw from him last year.
Right.
He's still probably going to be easier to count on than sending out Hellman or Kersey on a daily basis.
You said if a guy doesn't make it out of spring training, that sounded kind of sinister. I was kind of laughing about it. Last thing, and an interesting bullet point, was he talks about Matt Cantorino, who's been plagued by injuries. Sounded like he was ramping up in October. Is Matt Cantorino just the friends we made along the way, or do you think he is going to be a factor? Because they're leaving him on the 40 for a reason. A team could very easily have tried to outright him, and honestly, maybe he would have gotten Rule 5. Actually, he probably would have been a good candidate to be Rule 5 because of injuries, and you need to keep him on the roster for, I think, 90 days no matter what, even if they're on the 60-day IL. I don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic, but we just haven't seen enough of him to really know that he actually exists.
I mean, I think so. It sounded like, did Bobby say it that they had a session with him at the end of the year looking at him? I think that the stuff is some of the best stuff in the organization. Maybe he never makes it, but I feel like that's a guy that you can't give up on until you have to. He would be a really, and I'm glad that they are committing to him being a reliever. I think that last year they tried to do kind of one last oomph to try to give him a shot to be a starter, because the stuff is so good and he's got a 4-pitch mix that you can get really excited about. But given the arm struggles, at this point, you kind of have to resign yourself to he's going to be a reliever. So I don't know. I don't know if he makes it. I don't know if he's going to have the health to put together a real season. But if he does, like, you're talking about a very, very, very good reliever. And so you have to give him the time to figure that out. Even if he's lost like 3 years now, like, you have to give him as many chances as you possibly can before you have to give up on him.
Well, the Twins have had guys lose years and they've stuck with them. Lewis Thorpe comes to mind there. And then guys who had big stuff but couldn't get there were Dakota Chalmers was one that hung around for a while too. And so, yeah, I think you might be right. I don't know that he would necessarily be on the 40-man chopping block if things got dicey, but it would be nice to, see him on a mound in a competitive game. And that's not me casting aspersions. I'm just wishing for the best for him. He seems like a great dude. So, that's it. That's a wrap. And Gregg, thank you so much for taking time out of your obviously very busy schedule with everything you've been up to. I just appreciate your time, and hopefully you can have a wonderful, lovely holiday and maybe just be chill for a little bit.
I appreciate it. No, it's been really fun. These 5 shows in 10 days.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you thinking of me in Dave's absence. I've had a really good time, and I appreciate it.
Well, he's Gregg T. Masterson. I'm Brandon Moore, and we're signing off saying thank you so much for hanging out with Locked On Twins, and we'll see ya
tomorrow night.
Are
you mocking me?
No.
How dare you?
Maybe.